So today we will discuss about the background of reformism and anti-reformism in the 19th century. So in the previous class, we discussed about the national consciousness in India or spirit of nationalism in order to achieve the complete independence, particularly for the betterment of the society. And this time also we need to discuss the background and we can say about the causes of the reform movement, particularly in the context of India. The 19th century, it was a very significant phase in the history of modern India. It was, we can say about during this period that the country witnessed the emergence of many intellectual currents for national regeneration in all its aspects. The intellectual endeavors aimed at achieving all-sided improvement, and the main emphasis was accorded to social and religious aspects. But as you know, if we are talking about the reformism, because we need to study the nature of reformism in India. The nature of reformism, which particularly started during the 19th century, and Indian society in the 19th century, we can say about was caught in a very vicious way, and it was we can say about created by religious superstitions. And if we are talking about, it was very significant, how it was a very significant phase in the history of modern India, because the major concern particularly behind us, because how to bring about the social as well as economic justice for the betterment of the common citizen in the country, because our country particularly we are being controlled by the outside influence of power. The outside influence of power, they imposed different types of the hegemony in order to grab the resources from the country. This was particularly happened, we can say about for the Indians in the subcontinent. If we are talking about the 19th century, and 19th century particularly contributed a very significant phase, because in the history of, we can say about modern India, because it was during this period that country witnessed different types of the intellectual movements and intellectual discussion and intellectual debate and intellectual dialogue for, we can say about to upgrade our Indian society in terms of keeping different types of the components, because for our own survival in the society, because the intellectual endeavors, they aimed at achieving all-sided improvement. All religions in general, we can say about, if we will discuss this 19th century, why it was very much significant for us, because we need to explain why the 19th century, in what way the 19th century contributed a very significant historical phase, particularly in order to empower society, in empower the people, in empower our political institutions, because this was very much needed to know about the facts and figures of the nature of reformism in the Indian society. If we are talking about all religions in general and Hinduism in particular, because had become a compound of we can say about magic and superstitions, because these social conditions, we can say about were equally very depressing. The social conditions were equally very depressing. That is why the most distressing was the position of the women. That is, the birth of a girl was unwelcome in the society, her marriage a burden, and we can say about her widowhood inauspicious, because another debilitating factor which was, we can say about the caste system in Indian society, because it sought to maintain different types and fostered social divisions, because in keeping different types of the mispractices of the society, in keeping different types of the we can say about the bad habits of the society, social levels of the society, because we needed the society to be empowered, because we needed the national leaders to bring about economic as well as we can say about the social justice for the betterment of the common citizen at their own doorstep. Usually, we are saying that it sought to maintain a system of segregation. We can say about if we are talking about the system of segregation, because hierarchically the society is hierarchically ordered on the basis of ritual status, on the basis of we can say about the hampering social mobility, we can say about and foster social divisions, because we have different social segmentation, we have different social fragmentation in the society. Usually, the 19th century was a very significant phase because in the history of modern India to talk about the social evils, to root out or to rectify the shortcomings of our past history, and it sought to maintain a system of segregation. Segregation means hierarchically it was very much ordered on the basis of ritual status, on the basis of ritual status, on the basis of we can say about hampering we can social mobility and foster social segregation or social divisions, or we can say about the social fragmentation, because there were innumerable other practices because marked by we can say about that is by constraint, different types of the constraint, different types of the status authority, bigotry and blind fatalism, and rejecting them as a feature we can say about of a decadent society. The reform movement particularly sought to create a social climate for modernization, social climate for modernization, because the vision of the movement, particularly it was very multidimensional movement. Social cultural problems acquired predominance over economic and political ones in thinking. Whenever we are talking about the vision of the movement particularly struggled hard in order to mobilize the people all over the world, because to the major concern of the movement, how to bring the people into the national mainstream of the history, so that the basic rights, the basic liberties, the basic we can say about the duties of the people should not be cut on the basis of their own recognition and identity in the society. This was the major concern of the movement. In saying that the movement was very much multidimensional, very much we can say about so it has some social implications, it had some we can say about the cultural implications, because which were very much acquired predominance over economic and political ones in thinking, because social cultural reform formed the major plank of the 19th century, that is we can say about the Indian intellectual movement. Individuals, because during the past decade of the century, the movement was a very small affair of a limited number of individuals whose passion for fighting social obscurantism could not pose a major challenge to the advocates of we can say about orthodoxy. इसलिए हम आज कह रहे हैं कि the purpose of development, because purpose of we can say about the reformism is to bring new ideas. This was and this is the basic immediate objectives before us, because how to bring about the new ideas, how to bring about the new awakening, and how to create new consciousness, particularly in the context of socio-cultural reform, in the context of we can say about the vision of the movement, because how to bring about the development of new ideas, aiming at multi-dimensional we can say about change of the society. And 19th century India, particularly the Indian thinkers, their ideas on various aspects of socio-cultural life need to be studied if we are talking about the vision of the movement, and to analyze we can say about the overall impact that is of these new ideas on the socio-cultural religious beliefs in India. This is very much important for us, because 19th century was a very significant phase. It was a very significant phase because of valid reasons, because of different types of the we can say about the valid objectives, immediate concern of the objectives, because whenever we are talking about the 19th century, it contributed a significant historical movement of modern India, because it was during that period or that the country witnessed the emergence of many we can say about intellectual currents for national regeneration in all its aspects, that is we can say about, we can add social aspects, we can add cultural aspects, we can add economic aspects, we can add political aspects. This is very much important because this was spearheaded, particularly if we are talking about the vision of the movement. The vision of the movement is very much important because social reform movement, they are linked with the different ideas, including presence of colonial government, including we can say about economic and social backwardness of society, influence of modern Western ideas. There are, we can say about rise of intellectual awakening in the middle class and the poor position of women in society. This was very much important for us. Easily, although the intellectual currents, we can say about the intellectual endeavors aimed at achieving all-sided improvement. If we are talking about the intellectual, the contribution of the intellectual, particularly the social activists, they struggled hard in order to bring about social and economic justice for the society. This was the major concern of the social reform movement, because how to reform, how to bring about a change, how to bring about a complete transformation of the society so that our common citizen, they would be benefited in terms of their basic political rights, in terms of their basic social rights, in terms of their, we can say about basic economic rights as well. Because the people, on the basis of their own economic rights, they have been caught on the basis of their own recognition and identity. Because the most of the people, they were being relatively deprived. Because why they were relatively deprived? Because the outside influence of power, they imposed their economic hegemony upon the society. They imposed the economic hegemony upon the society, because there was what ultimately happened to the Indians. There were economic drain for the Indians. There was rampant poverty. There was large-scale unemployment. There were, we can say about problems of regional discrimination in the society. So that no, because it was very tough job to accommodate such type of diversity. If we people were being controlled by the outside influence of power, because this is very much important, because the main emphasis was accorded to social and religious aspects. The main emphasis was accorded and priority was given, particularly we can say about social and religious aspects. Social and religious aspect, despite the vision, we can say about of the movement being multidimensional. If the movement is multidimensional, because sociocultural problems, we can say about upward predominance over economic and political ones in thinking. Because in a word, we can say about socio-cultural reform formed the major plank of 19th century Indian intellectual movement. इसलिए हम आज कह रहे हैं कि this was the immediate concern of the movement, this was the vision of the movement, this was the mission of the movement, so that we can talk about the first decades of the century, the first decades of the social religious reform movement of the century, because the movement was a very small affair of a, we can say about limited number of individuals, If we are talking about the limited number of individuals, because mobilization was very less, and whose passion for fighting, we can say about social obscurantism, could not pose a major challenge, because we can say about to the advocates of orthodoxy, because mindset was very much different. There was different types of the orthodox mentality of the people. The psychology of the individual, particularly, were very much different, because in terms of religious institutions, in terms of, we can say about the metaphysical ideas, in terms of, we can say about the religious scriptures. The movement maintained its momentum. The reform movement, social, we can say about religious reform movement, it gained momentum. It maintained its momentum and reached, we can say about its peak during the second half of the 19th century. This we can say about, in this chapter we will look beyond the strict chronological limits, the sequential limits, because of this course, and also consider developments, we can say about in the latter decades of the 19th century. If we are talking about the latter decades of the 19th century, in order to present a complete picture of socio-religious reform movement, because it is proposed to study here, we can say about the basic features of the movement, the basic features of the intellectual, social and religious movements oriented, we can say about towards reform in India during the 19th century. If we are talking about, because we would first try to study in brief the ideas and activities of individual intellectuals. That is, we can say about Raja Rammohn Rai. Raja Rammohn Rai, the contributions of Rammohn Rai was very much significant as a father of, we can say about Indian Renaissance. He laid the foundation of modern India because Rammohn Rai has been aptly described as the father of the modern India. He has different types of the multifaceted personality because he touched upon nearly every aspect of national life. Because he struggled for the regeneration of the Indian nations, he published his philosophical work Tohapa ul Murahidin in 1805. Because Rammohn's reform activities were accelerated after, we can say about settled down in Calcutta in 1814, because he started in Atmiya Sabha and carried on consistent struggle against the religious and social practices. This was very much important because Rammohn Rai remained a rationalist during the entire period of his intellectual life. Because the first significant step in to eradicate social evils was taken by Rammohn Rai. Social evil, the major concern of the Rammohn Rai was to particularly how to eradicate social evils from the society, so that our society would become more competitive, our society would become more collective, so that we need to maintain social solidarity, particularly for our survival in the society. Because if we are not talking about social evils, society would be in turmoil. That is, we can say about he was a very rationalist because during the entire period of his intellectual life, because he published a new society, Brahma Samaj. 1828 May, he published Brahma Sabha, which later came to be known as Brahma Samaj. His primary purpose was to rid Hinduism of its evils and to freeze monotheism. Because the Rammohn Rai's the contributions, whatever the political contributions and whatever the social contributions of Rammohn Rai, and it was very much significant and it was very much informative in order to bring about the complete change of the society. That is why we are talking about the significant role played by Rammohn Rai was very much unique in order to bring about or in order to let down the foundations of the modern India, because he has been called as the father of modern India. A multifaceted personality he had, as he was, and he touched upon every aspect of national life and struggled for the, we can say about regeneration of the, we can say about Indian nations. That is why we are talking about Rammohn Rai, particularly the contribution, social political ideas of Rammohn Rai was very much significant in empowering the Indian society, because Rammohn's reform activities, were accelerated after the settled down in Calcutta in 1840, because he started the Atmiya Sabha and carried on consistent struggle against religious and social malpractices. Social malpractices. This was very much important because he denounced idolatry and advocated monotheism. This was the major concern of the Raja Rammohn Rai, because Raja Rammohn Rai is considered to be the father of the modern Indian Renaissance. He was born, we can say about an orthodox and well-to-do Brahmin family. A Brahmin family mein he was born in a village, we can say about, that is the Burdwan district of West Bengal in 1772 and died in 1833. Besides English and Bengali, Rammohn Rai acquired knowledge of Sanskrit, Persian and Arabic, because he also knew Hebrew, Latin and Greek. He made a deep study of Hindu and Muslim literature and philosophy, because he believed in the progressive reform of religion. He was not regressive at all in the orientation of thinking. Easily, Rammohn Rai was being considered very important, particularly for our Indian Renaissance, because he laid the foundation of the modern India in terms of keeping different types of the social betterment, in keeping different aspects of the political betterment, in keeping different types of the, we can say about the cultural betterment of the society, because he wanted to establish political equality, political freedom. He wanted to establish economic equality. He wanted to establish social equality, so that social justice would be prevailed, particularly for the common citizen in the Indian society. Our society would become more sustainable in terms of, we can say, about keeping or implementing different types of the legislations. He made a deep study of Hindu and Muslim laws, literature and philosophy. Sorry. He believed in the progressive reform of religion and a society with a liberal outlook. Raman Rai did not believe in worshipping the images of God. Monotheism was his main slogan. Easily, the Raja Raman Rai is very much important. Raja Raman Rai is important because he founded the Brahmo Samaj, the literal meaning of which is one God society. This was very much important because the Orthodox Hindu did not cherish the ideals of its institution. But generally, people welcomed, we can say, about the new organizations, because Raman Rai was a secularist and he was inspired by Christianity. He was very much inspired by Christianity because Christianity, not only he was inspired by the Christianity, but he was inspired by Islam and Upanishads, because he had great faith in the uncompromising monotheism of Islam. This was very much important if we are talking about the significant social contributions or religious contributions of Raja Raman Rai, because he learned about the concept of the unity of God. He learned the concept of the unity of God as an essence of, we can say, about Hinduism. This was the essence of Hinduism from the study of Upanishad, Brahma Sutras, and we can say about the Gitas. This is, we can say, about 1828 he established a new society. The new society which was being considered as an informative society, so that the people, they will be collectively participated in order to rectify the past shortcomings of our history, past shortcomings of our social levels. Because Raman Rai, if we are talking about the political, social and economic and cultural aspects of the Raman Rai, we need to discuss about how Raman Rai thought that without sacrificing or discarding the genuine spiritual and cultural heritage, India could not have a new philosophy, absorbing and assimilating the modernism imported from the West, because he strongly advocated use of modern science and technology in education, and also we can say about use of the English language. He was very much inspired by the English education. Raman Rai, because was in fact a rationalist and a pioneer of English education and enlightened journalism, because he championed the cause of exploited peasantry. He was championed as a cause of exploited, we can say, about peasantry. His particularly main ideas or aim or objectives, immediate objectives of Raman Rai was to, we can say, about relate religion to all aspects of the life. This was very much important for Raman Rai, because whether it may be individual, whether it may be, we can say, about social, and whether it may be, we can say, about national, because universal religion particularly was his message. That is why Raman Rai talked about the nature of the reformism in the Indian society, because reformism was very much needed. Reformism was the realization of the fact that this was the realization of the fact that we needed reformism, because to bring about some change for our betterment in the society, for the betterment of our survival in the society. He is particularly, we can say, about championed the cause of exploited peasantry, because his main aim was to relate religion to all aspects of the life, individual, maybe social, and we can say about the national, because he, however, used the Vedas and Upanishads in worship, sermons and devotional music, with emphasis on the universality of their contents. This was very much important because Raman Rai worked against irrational institutions like sati and child marriage. This was very much important. This was very much significant contributions, because in order to reform the society, reform was very much necessary, whether it was guided through revolution or it was guided through mobilization of the people. Actually, Raman Rai wanted to bring about some sort of change, particularly for the betterment of the common citizen at their doorstep. The basic rights of the individual, it should not be caught, it should not be attacked. It should not be deprived in terms of, particularly we can say about our recognition, in terms of our, we can say about our identity, and we can say about our acknowledgement. Because his main aim was to relate religion to all aspects of the life. This was, we can say about Raman Rai worked against irrational institutions like sati and child marriage. He was champions of the cause of the women. Because if we are talking about the ideas and role played by Raman Rai during the 19th century, we can talk about the establishment of the Brahmo Samaj as well. Because Brahmo Samaj, with the help of Brahmo Samaj, he advocated widow remarriage, he advocated divorce, he advocated child marriage, he advocated civil marriage and education for women. Because inheritance of property for women and intercaste marriage were special programs undertaken by the Brahmo Samaj. This was, we can say about, very much important because he was against the caste system in the Indian society. As we can say about, it put barriers in the ways of, we can say about, growth of the Indian society. This was, we can say about, the essence of our complete development or all-round development of our Indian society. The way the national leaders, they struggled hard relentlessly to bring about socio-economic justice for the common citizen at their doorstep. Because if we are talking about the role played by the or significant contributions of the Raman Rai, because he was against the caste system, it put barriers in the ways of growth of Indian society. Because Raman Rai was essentially a Democrat. He was essentially a Democrat. He was essentially a humanist. That is why he did not hesitate in borrowing good from the British Raj and Western culture. This was very much important for us to know about the complete picture of the society, because the Brahmo Samaj was an institution for all sorts of people without distinctions, for the worship, we can say about, of the one supreme God without idolatry. Historians, we can remember R.C. Majumdar, Rai Chaudhuri, Kalinkinkar Datta are of the few that, because Raman Rai never regarded himself as anything but a Hindu. Because this is very much important, because Raman Rai laid stress on, we can say about, India's need for Western scientific knowledge, mathematics, natural philosophy, chemistry. We can say about different things, multidimensional aspects need to be discussed about Raman Rai, so that we need to know the nature of our reformist movement or reformism, for particularly for the complete transformation of our Indian society. Because Raman took off not only social religious problems, but also, we can say about, political economic issues of the times. This was very much important. We can talk about the contributions of Radha Raman Rai in the field of reformism of the Indian society, because he stood for the Indianization of services, trial by jury, separation of powers between the executive and the judiciary, freedom of the press, and judicial, we can say about, equality between Indians and Europeans, because he criticized the Jamindari system for its oppressive practices. Well, what was the Jamindari system? The Jamindari system, particularly the Jamindars, they exploited the tenants. They exploited the tenants in terms of land rights, in terms of economic efficiency, in terms of monetary problems, because the Jamindars, they collected higher revenue from the tenants. The revenue particularly were being siphoned out to the hands of the British masters. This was very much, we can say about, the major problems and problematic conditions particularly the Indian society faced. And already on the other hand, there was, we can say about, an economic drain for the Indians. There was large scale poverty, there was large scale unemployment, there was regional discrimination in terms of keeping different types of the mispractices in the society. So that Raman Rai wanted to reform it. Raman Rai vehemently criticized the Jamindari system for its oppressive practices, because he was a progenitor of nationalist consciousness and ideology in India. Because he was a very internationalist, libertarian, democrat in his orientation, because his temperament. So how to empower the society in implementing democratic means, because he wanted to bring about democracy. Democracy, it should be treated as a way of life for the people. Once Abraham Lincoln said, democracy is of the people, by the people, and for the people. This is, we can say, about a very common definition, because how to apply our brain in order to make our society more sustainable, in order to make our society more reformative, in order to make our society more democratic, in order to make our society more rational. This was very much important, particularly the role played by the Raja Rammohn Rai, because Raja Rammohn Rai wanted, we can say, about to bring about multidimensional reform, particularly for the complete or complete transformation of the society, or all-round development of the society. In terms of, we can say, about the reform of religion, reform of our political institutions, we can say about reform of our educational system, reform of our social levels. That is why we can say the contributions of Rammohn Rai was very much informative in the 19th century, particularly during the time of 19th century in the Indian subcontinent, because he believed in his concern for the cause of liberty. His immediate objective to go for the achievement of liberty, how to accomplish our goal. This was very much important. How to achieve our democracy, how to achieve our nationalism. This was very much important, led him to cancel all his social engagements when he came to know of the failure of the revolution in 1821. Easily, Rammohn Rai was certainly the first luminous star on the Indian intellectual firmament of the 19th century. But after that, there is Young Bengal movement came to dominate in the particularly 19th century Indian society, because about this time new and radical ideas began to be propagated by a band of young Bengali intellectuals known as the Young Bengal. This movement was largely initiated by an Anglo-Indian teacher of the Hindu college. His name was Henry Vivian Desrosiers. The period was marked particularly 1809 to 1831. Desrosiers attacked old and decadent customs. This was very much important, because whenever we are talking about the Bengal movement, because whenever we are talking about Bengal movement, because this movement was largely initiated by the Anglo-Indian teacher. Because the movement was, the nature of the movement was radical and critical outlook among his students who questioned all authority, who questioned particularly to go for love, liberty, and worship truth. Desrosiers attacked old and decadent customs and traditions, we can say about, and traditions, and began to question, we can say, about the complete fabric of the Hindu society and religion. Because the contribution of Desrosiers was very much significant, it was very much informative in order to bring about a change within us. Easily, the Desrosiers attacked old and decadent customs, the customary rules of the society, the traditional value system, we can say about traditional value system, it can refer to superstitions, it can refer to societal customary rules of the society, the old temperament of our religious spirit, metaphysical ideas, because this was the major concern. So how to discard the old values, how to discard our customary rules of the traditions of the society, so that we need to achieve the concept of rationality for the society. Rationality was very much important for our reformist movement in the Indian society, because we needed to make our society more democratic in terms of rationalization, in terms of practical, we can say about the practical, whatever the things, and to look at the practical difficulties of the people. This was very much important, and this movement was largely, we can say about, very radical ideas which was developed, particularly in order to propagate different types of the awareness program, particularly in order to mobilize the people in the society. And this was very much important. Then after that, we can discuss about the Devendranath and Kesava Chandra, because Devendranath Tagore, the father of Rabindranath Tagore, because again put life into it, because in 1839 he established, we can say about the Tatabodhini Sabha, to carry on Ramon's ideals independent of the Brahma Samaj. This was very much important because under the aegis of the Tatabodhini Sabha, emphasis on indigenous language and culture became much more pronounced. And another great intellectual associated with the Brahma Samaj was Keshav Chandra Sen, and Keshav laid stress on female participation. This was very much important if we are talking about the Devendranath and Keshav Chandra's contribution to reform our society, because in the meanwhile the impetus to reform given by Ramon had lost much of its momentum. Because if we are talking about Devendranath Tagore, he was a father of Rabindranath Tagore. Again, put life into it. In 1839, he established the Tattvabodhini Sabha to carry on Ramon's ideals, independent of the Brahma Samaj, because it aimed at counteracting the rapid progress of Christianity. There was rapid progress of Christian religion in India, and advocated the development of Vedantism. This was the essence of our, we can say, about the movement, because under the aegis of Tattvabodhini Sabha, emphasis on indigenous language and culture became more pronounced. This was very much, we can say, about priority was particularly given to the essence of the culture, because Bengali text in all subjects were published. Press was established in 1843. A journal of the organization was started for the propagation of ideas. Devendranath Tagore became a Brahmo in 1843, and he organized the Brahmo Samaj in the same year. That is why Devendranath Tagore was very famous, particularly in reforming our Indian society. And another great intellectual we can talk about, the Keshav Chandra Sen, because his role cannot be ignored in terms of keeping the intellectual movements and intellectual, we can say, about the perceptions of history, because he is very much associated with the Brahmo Samaj. That is Brahmo Samaj, because the Keshav Chandra Sen, because he laid stress on female, we can say, about emancipation. Female emancipation was the major concern of the Keshav Chandra Sen, because he emphasized universalism. He emphasized universalism as against Devendranath's stress on national Hindu identity, because we need to preserve, we need to protect the Hindu identity. Hindu identity was the major concern of the, we can say, about the reformist, the movement of reformism in the Indian society. Despite, we can say, about doctrinal differential differences among themselves, we can say, about the Brahma Samajist collectively contributed, we can say, about to the propagation of different types of the Ramon's ideas, and we can say about the changing Bengal society, because he wanted to, he made reform particularly in the Bengal society, because there were different types of the social practices, social evils which were being prevalent in the Bengal society, because though they belong to the Bengal society, because they wanted to reform it first. This was the major chunk of the movement. Next is, that is, we can say, about the Vidyasagar and Vivekananda movement, because this movement was started during the time of second half of the 19th century, and the 19th century particularly witnessed the emergence of the Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, because he was a Sanskrit scholar. He introduced the study Western thought. He introduced the study of Western thought, because in the Sanskrit college, and opened its gate to non-Brahmin student, because his great contribution, however, lay in the field of female emancipation. Widow marriage was the specific social issue he devoted his entire life to, because Vidyasagar particularly, we can say, about very much important, because he became the principal of the Sanskrit college in 1851. He introduced the study of Western thought in the Sanskrit college and opened its gates to non-Brahmin students. He wrote a Bengali primer, we can say, about, and helped develop a distinct modern prose style in Bengali. That is why his great contribution lay in the field of female emancipation. widow marriage was the specific social issue. If we are talking about and priority would be given to go for the widow marriage, it was the specific social issue he devoted his entire life to, because his agitation for legalizing the remarriage of widows fetched support of the enlightened sections from various parts of the country. It was very much important to know about the facts and figures of the complete picture of the society during that time, because finally such a law was enacted under the supervision of, we can say, about the Vidyasagar, the first we can say the legal Hindu widow marriage among the upper caste in India. Upper caste in India was celebrated in 1856, and through his endeavors, nearly we can say about 25 widow marriages, particularly were solemnized, particularly between 1855 and 1860. This was, we can say, about certainly a major breakthrough in the history of the movement, because in the history of radical social reform, if we are talking about the nature of the reformism, and was a great advance, we can say, about from Rammon's idea of, we can say, about the ideas of ascetic widowhood, because he promoted the highest education of the women for their general uplift, because as secretary to the Bethune School, because founded in Calcutta 1849, because he was instrumental in leading the movement for women's, we can say, about the education, women's education. Priority was given to women's education, women upliftment, women's emancipation, to upgrade the complete status, social status, economic status, political status, and cultural status of the women in the society, because he also campaigned against child marriage and also polygamy, because the last of the great thinkers of the 19th century, if we are talking about the 19th century Bengal, who created a star in Hindu society, was Devendranath, known as Swami Vivekananda. His guru or spiritual preceptor was Ramakrishna Paramahansa. Ramakrishna Paramahansa. अगर विवेकानंद का बात करेंगे, we need to talk about the Ramakrishna Paramahansa, because his guru and spiritual preceptor was Ramakrishna Paramahansa. Vivekananda's guru. Ramakrishna stressed universalism in religious and denounced religious, we can say, about particularist, because this was very much important, because if we are putting more emphasis on religious, we can say, about the religious particularism, his primary concern remained with religious salvation and not social salvation. Religious salvation and not social salvation, because his major objective, how to reform society in terms of keeping different types of the metaphysical ideas, in terms of keeping different types of the social religious scriptures, in terms of keeping or rejecting the old social values or superstitions, or condemned the restrictions which imposed by the caste system in the Indian society, because Vivekananda wanted to condemn the caste system and people's obsession with, we can say, about rituals and superstitions. This was very much important, because his message was popularized inside and outside India by his famous disciple Swami Vivekananda, because Vivekananda condemned the caste system, people's obsession with rituals and superstition. This was very much important. 1896, he founded the Ramakrishna Mission to carry on humanitarian and social work. Ramakrishna Mission was established on behalf of the efforts made by Swami Vivekananda. The major objective of the Ramakrishna Mission was to provide social service to the people. How to provide social service to the people? Because on behalf of the efforts made by Vivekananda, because to bring about the progressive attitude of the society, putting more emphasis the progressive attitude of the people. The progressive attitude of the people will certainly empower the society, according to Vivekananda. Because Vivekananda condemned the caste system, because we required, the society required. This was the nature of reformism. The nature of the reformism. So how to go for or rectify the past, the social structure, past, the shortcomings of our social structure in the society. That is our caste system, because we need to empower the different caste. we need to empower the different distinctions of the class, so that our society need to become more collective. Our society need to maintain solidarity, particularly in keeping different types of the diversity. Though it was very particularly we can say about the top job for us to maintain diversity in the society, right? So next is Western India का हमारा बात हो रहा है कि Western India में main focus of reform movement was on social ideas rather than we can say about the social, rather than on religious and philosophical ideas. Throughout the 19th century, we can say about there developed a general awareness among the various lower castes against many forms of the social discrimination. Many forms of social discrimination. This was very much important. Social discrimination. The first sounding of intellectual revolt in Maharashtra were heard in the early decades of the 19th century. Because the Western India, the main focus of reform movement we can say about was on social, progressive social ideas. It was very much reformative ideas, because it was not only through we can say about bloodshed revolution, but also we can say about to empower society or to bring about some sort of reform, political reform maybe, our social reform maybe, our economic reform maybe, because economic reform may we need to establish economic justice. Social reform may we need to establish social justice or social equality rather than in going for the recognition of social inequality in the society. That is why the main focus of the reform movement was on social ideas rather than religious and philosophical. Social ideas means how to empower or how to implement the progressive ideas of the society, so that we need to rectify social discrimination, we need to rectify social injustice, we need to rectify political inequality, or need to rectify economic inequality in the society. Justice should be prevailed on. This is we can say about the nature of our Western India, and the reform movement were being started with the help of different political national leaders. Agree? Because we can say about the main contribution of this movement was in broadening the scope of the movement, because this was very much against caste distinctions and believed in the oneness of humanity. He particularly talking about different types of the social issues. It was very much important. Social issues. The early intellectuals who initiated and led the movement, particularly we can say about the most prominent were Bal Shastri, Jambedkar, and Dadova Pandurang. These are the eminent leaders, national leaders, and they contributed a lot, because in order to bring about the nature of the social reform movement in Indian context. Because whenever we are talking about the nature of the movement, nature of reformism, latter phase of the 19th century particularly started because it gained strength during the second half of the century, because personalities emerged. Vishnu Parsuram Shastri Pandit, Jyotiba Phule, Ramakrishna Gopal Bhandarkar, Narayan Mahadev Parmanand, Mahadev Govindranath, Vishnu Shastri, Chiplunkar, Keti Telang, Ganesh Vasudev Joshi, and these are the prominent leaders where we can say about we can say about their contributions, and we can say about their works, the progressive work which were being made by these national leaders in order to bring about a complete change in the society. Complete change means society needed transformation. The national leaders needed transformation. It was we can say about the required things in particularly to make the society more progressive, to make the society we can say about more democratic, and to make the society more rational. Isliye we are talking about the nature of the Indian society in terms of keeping different types of the components, in terms of keeping different types of the social evils, in terms of keeping different types of the we can say about political components, in terms of keeping different types of the past events. This was very much important to know about the nature of social and religious reform movement, not only in North India, but also in Western India. This was very much important because we can say about Ranade was a man of different types of the contributions which were being witnessed during the particularly when they mobilized people, because they mobilized the people. The mobilization was very much necessary for the Indian society. Why it was necessary? Because the character, this was witnessed particularly with the character of social religious reform movement. Social religious reform movement. This was the basic nature of social religious reform movement. South India में a leading light of the social reform movement in the early stage was Kondukari Virasalingam शुरुआत हुई थी. His missionary zeal on the issues we can say about like remarriage of widows, female education, generally on the we can say about upliftment, and we can say about the female education, generally on the upliftment of women and removal of social vices, made him the father figure of the latter generation of Andhra social reformer. And this was very much important because if we are talking about the different types of the movement, different types of the socio-religious movement, this is the character we can say about the character of the socio-religious reform movement, 19th century, and how did they contribute to the national awakening in India in the 19th century. Witnessed a series of socio-religious reform movement because which aimed at reorientations of the Indian society along modern lines, because we needed to establish the modern society, the rationalistic society, where we can exercise our rights, we can exercise our freedom, where we can perform our duties in order to accomplish our goal. This was the basic objectives, and this was the we can say about the fellow feelings of every Indian leaders, because if we are talking about the nature of reformism, so Indian society in the 19th century was trapped in a web of religious superstitions, and we can say about social obscurantism. This is our conclusion. So because of the advent modern thought and ideas with the coming of the British, because the Britishers, they imposed vehemently and intentionally grabbed our resources, because our resources were being siphoned out to the hands of the British masters, because this was the realization of the time. We needed society, we needed the society, because a reformative society, a progressive society, where every people, every individuals, they must have every claim, every individuals, they must have every demand, every individuals, they must have every, we can say about their exercise of power in order to reveal the truth. This was, we can say about the nature of the movement. This was, we can say about the immediate objectives of the movement, because whenever we are talking about the major social problems which came in the preview of the reform movement were emancipation of women, in which sati, infanticide, child, widow remarriage, and we can say about casteism, untouchability were taken up for particularly enlightening the society. This was our basic objectives of enlightenment. And in the religious spheres, main issues like idolatry, we can say about polytheism, we can say about religious superstitions, customary rules of the society, and exploitation. We need to talk about subjugation of the society, particularly by priests were taken up. Okay? Because Brahma Samaj was established. There are different, not only Brahma Samaj was collectively responsible, but also other, we can say about different types of the social awareness, political awareness, different types of the mobilization movements, in terms of political mobilization, in terms of social mobilizations, in terms of different types of the particularly we can say about the political movements or civil liberty movements emerged and developed in order to make our society more progressive. That is why we are talking about the religious character or character of socio-religious reforms in 19th century. This was the topic of discussion, and this was we can say about the nature of the movement, because if we are talking about the nature of the movement, we need to talk about how social movement, social reform movement are linked with different ideas, how it is linked with different, we can say about the progressive attitude of the people. This is very much important, because including we can say about presence of colonial government, economic, social backwardness of society, influence of modern Western ideas, rise of intellectual awakening in the middle class, and poor position, particularly of women in the society. This was the nature of the, we can say, about the background of our social religious reform movement, because British rule in India acted as a, we can say, about the catalyst, because to deep-seated, we can say, about social changes, because Western culture also influenced, we can say, about the Indian life and thought in several ways. And this was very much important for us to know about the past history. Without knowing the past history, we cannot make the society more progressive, because this was our requirement, how to make our, how to give the autonomy to the individuals, how to empower society in terms of establishment of our freedom, how to achieve political equality in terms of our establishment of our political constitution for the betterment of the people. Easily we required, particularly in order to make our society, or we needed reform for the society, because this was the complete transformation of the society, and revolutionary changes particularly were being occurred in order to particularly empower the society, empower the government, in order to empower the individuals. This was particularly, we can say, about happened in the Indian society. Easily there are different types of the political philosophers. They struggled hard to make the society more democratic, right? Thank you very much.